We're reviewing the first 4 games of the New York Giants 2021 season, storylines, surprises, and what to watch in the next few weeks. Coming up next on today's Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina. Happy Friday to everybody. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Giants podcast your first listen of the day. We really appreciate it. And thank you again to everybody who has been signing up as a subscriber, liking the channel, liking the videos, giving me feedback on the videos. My gosh, I am absolutely humbled by the response I've gotten from everybody. And I so appreciate it. It just makes me want to work even harder than I already do to come up with different types of content that'll keep you coming back here to the Locked On Giants podcast. So anyway, we are going to take a look at the first 4 games of the Giants season, but we're going to take more of a bigger picture type of scenario here. We're going to look at the top storylines, the surprises, and what to look for in the next few weeks as we go through the month of October. I'm going to talk about the key storylines, the surprises, and what to watch here. I'm going to give you a little overview and let me know what you think. If you agree, disagree, if there's something I missed, drop a comment in the box below if you're watching on YouTube, or send me an email, lockedongiantspodcast@gmail.com. That is also in the show notes. So let's jump right in. All right, we're going to start off with the top storylines from the first 4 games of the Giants season. Now, I tried to narrow this down a little bit rather than look at, as opposed to like the 1-3 record. I tried to drill down a little bit. And I think we have to start off with the injury situation. And the thing with the injury situation for the Giants is last year, if you remember, they lost Saquon Barkley in week 2, and that was a devastating injury, no question. This year, however, the Giants have lost a lot more guys to devastating injuries, and for the season, I might add. Blake Martinez to a torn ACL, Shane Lemieux to a knee injury. And by the way, I know head coach Joe Judge said there was a chance he might be back. I'm not counting on him coming back this year. And of course, Nick Gates being lost for the season with the broken leg, and his career being a question mark, according to some at any rate. So the injuries have been a big, big factor. Now, that said, let's talk about the impact that they've had on the team. I think of the significant injuries I just mentioned, Blake Martinez right now is the one where I would say I'm not so sure that the Giants have filled that spot. I know they've had Tate Crowder in there. They've had Reggie Ragland in there. I still haven't seen enough to say that that spot has been completely filled to where I'm not worried about it anymore. So obviously that's something to keep an eye on moving forward. Now, going back to the offensive line, the Giants have lost, like I said, Lemieux. I forgot to mention Shane Lemieux. They lost Nick Gates. They had 2 guys retire early on. The Giants have gone through 6 different offensive line combinations. But here's the thing, folks. The offensive line, which was probably the biggest question mark for this team coming into 2021 outside of Daniel Jones, they haven't been that bad. I mean, they haven't been, all world, lights out. But here's the thing. Coming into this season, Andrew Thomas was the key. Andrew Thomas, the left tackle. If that kid hadn't taken a step forward, then what probably would have happened is the team would have had to roll coverage help over to him, roll some help over his way, which would have kind of upset the balance of the line a little bit. But Andrew Thomas, who has faced quite a few good matchups so far in the first 4 games, he's held his own. I mean, the stability in coaching has helped. The fact that he's been primarily healthy has helped. Now he is dealing with a foot ailment that popped up this week, and he's been limping noticeably, I might add, but he's expected to play unless, he takes a turn for the worse. But, Thomas has been really good, and that has helped the rest of the offensive line because, like I said, they don't have to put extra help over on that side. And in fact, Saquon Barkley and the running game, most of the running yardage has come from the left side of the offensive line. So that speaks to the job that Andrew Thomas has done, playing next to, I might add, Lemieux, Gates, Bredesen, play next to 4 different left guards. So kudos to Andrew Thomas and that offensive line. Really, the only disappointment there on the offensive line, if we're looking for nitpicks, is that Matt Peart didn't step in and grab that right tackle job, which of course went to Nate Solder. Now, what's interesting is with the Giants having signed Isaiah Wilson to their practice squad, the hope there is that Wilson will develop and be able to take that right tackle spot next year when Solder moves on. And, they're just going to have to figure out where Peart's going to fit into the equation. Is he going to move to right guard, in anticipation that maybe Will Hernandez might not be back? I don't know, but I think that's the long-term plan right now, but that's subject to change. So, all right. So we have injuries. We just talked about injuries. Saquon returns. That's another big story we talked about. And again, on Giants Country, I have an article. Actually, Coach Gene Clemens wrote an article about how we know Saquon Barkley is all the way back. So I'm not going to spoil that one. That one should be up by the time you guys see this particular podcast or hear it. That article is scheduled to drop 8 a.m. on Giants Country. But the fact that Saquon Barkley was there week 1, there was some talk about potentially holding Saquon Barkley out for the first couple of weeks because, we talk about the timing of the injury and how long a guy missed and all that. And even though Saquon Barkley was injured in week 2 of last year, he technically didn't have his surgery until I think it was early November, or it was either late October, early November. So really you start the clock on how long the guy is, his rehab lasts effective when he has the surgery. So Barkley made it back technically in less than a year, and he has looked very, very good in his return. So kudos to him, and kudos to the Giants for being patient with him and just spacing this out and bringing him along slowly so as to not, put him at risk. And then our final storyline, again, I mentioned the offensive line, I mentioned the injuries and the fact that they've had 6 different combinations. Kudos to Rob Sale. Rob Sale, this is his first year as an NFL offensive line coach. And the Giants, remember, threw a lot of resources towards that offensive line in terms of coaching. Rob Sale, who joins Ben Wilkerson, the assistant offensive line coach. Pat Flaherty was brought in. Freddie Kitchens was reassigned to help with that unit. I think to an extent, Sean Spencer's helping a little bit from the defensive perspective, what they can help, do better and whatnot. So the resources the Giants put towards that offensive line, very promising. Again, that line is not all world like, the Dallas lines of a few years ago, but that line also hasn't been such a disaster to leave us saying, oh my God, we're in trouble. So kudos again to the offensive line for withstanding the struggles and the losses. And, look, they still have a ways to go. They still have to batten down the hatches when it comes to facing stunts and twists, but they're headed in the right direction after 4 games. All right, Giant fans, we have much more coming up here on today's Locked On Giants podcast. But first, get all the latest news, odds, info, and sign-up bonuses for all your sporting needs by heading over to betonline.ag on your laptop or mobile device. When you open an account and use our special promo code NFL100, you will get a 100% welcome bonus on your initial deposit. Again, that's code NFL100 for your 100% welcome bonus. Terms and conditions apply. Bet Online, your online sportsbook experts. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. My name is Patricia Traina. We are looking at storylines, surprises, and then what to expect over the next few weeks here on today's show. And we are going to take a look at 3 surprises. These are things that I found surprising. Now, you may agree, you may disagree. That's fine. That's what this is all about. So here are my top 3 surprises to emerge from the first 4 weeks of the Giants 2021 season. First on my list is how long it took for Kadarius Toney to get involved in the offense. Now, I get it. That's a coaching decision. That's not up to the kid. But week after week in the beginning part of the season, we would ask Jason Garrett, the offensive coordinator, about Kadarius Toney. And every week, it was pretty much the same answer. Garrett would remind us that Toney missed a lot of training camp practices because of COVID, because of the hamstring injury he had and all that stuff, and he needed to catch up. But then I go back to the early part of the season when Tyke Tolbert, the receivers coach, basically told the reporters that Toney was his star pupil in the classroom, that whenever a question came up or a challenge, he always knew that he could count on Toney to deliver the right answer. So something wasn't quite adding up. And, it's kind of interesting because Sterling Shepard was the slot receiver, or is the slot receiver on this team. And he had a solid summer. And that continued into the start of the season. And then, of course, he unfortunately had the hamstring strain. And then Toney got plugged in. And guess what? Toney, you saw against the Saints what this kid can bring, despite the fact that he's not, that he's not as accomplished a receiver as Shepard. And by that, I mean, he hasn't been playing the position as long as Shepard has. All right. So the Giants get Toney involved in the offense. And not only do we see some of the gadget plays, there was that one play where he looked like he was going to attempt a pass, but then he wisely brought it down and kept it. A throwback to his high school football days when he was a quarterback. But the kid, just watching him in the open field and how he was causing defensive backs to break ankles, really. I mean, it was just so exciting. You could see the electrifying speed and quickness and change of direction that this kid has. And you just wonder, what were the coaches waiting for, to get him involved? So now he's involved. Shepard may or may not be back this week. I have a feeling Shepard won't play this weekend, but you never know. If he starts to feel better, he might be back. But what happens when he does come back? Does he lose snaps to the kid in the slot? My guess is he will. And should have happened all along. But, like I said, a surprise. So, all right, the next surprise for me, the downfield passing game. Now, go back to last year, and let's talk about this for a second here. Last year, the offensive line protection was like Swiss cheese. You never knew where the pressure was going to come. The Giants had no playmakers who could get open, who could separate on a regular basis, and thus they weren't able to really attempt a lot of deep passes. Now, I always talk about, and I mentioned this, I believe, on yesterday's show, that a good NFL receiver with decent speed should be able to get open for a deeper pass route in about 2 seconds. The Giants really didn't have that. So when we look at the deep downfield passing game and why that has kind of taken off a little bit, look at number one, Daniel Jones and the step forwards he's taken in his development. This is year 2 in this offense. Right? He's a lot more comfortable. He's making quicker reads. And above all, he's making better decisions with the ball in his hands. 2 very important things he wasn't doing necessarily last year. The speed, I mentioned the speed at receiver, Kadarius Toney, Kenny Golladay, and John Ross. I mean, I went back and I looked at the average separation for those guys in the Saints game. And I think those numbers were amongst the highest I've ever seen for receivers on the Giants in a game. And those stats, by the way, are available on Next Gen Stats if you want to check that out. We can also talk about the offensive line and the job that they've done, which I've mentioned before. And we've also got to give kudos to Jason Garrett because, Jason Garrett, you could say what you want about him. People have said he's too vanilla, he's too conservative, and to be fair to Jason Garrett, sometimes you don't know if what you're seeing with a play call is the quarterback audibling out of what was originally called. And the Giants will never tell us if there was an audible called or whatnot, unless, of course, it's a spectacular play that works. So that said, you wonder how much of Jason Garrett was limited by the talent he didn't have last year versus finding what he had this year, getting those guys, the Galladays, the Tonys, et cetera, getting those guys to shake off the rust and getting them more involved. So I think all those factors combined have helped to set up the deep ball. And I also want to mention the threat of Daniel Jones being able to run, that the deep ball has helped the running game. So now you don't have stacked boxes against the Giants. Now defenses have to account for Daniel Jones as a runner. They have to account for Saquon Barkley as a runner. They have to account for, those trick gadget plays if Kadarius Toney is used as a runner. So there's many more angles now to this offense, many more dimensions that weren't there last year. And I think Jason Garrett having a little bit wider of a toolbox has been able to capitalize on that. Now, again, I'm just going off of one game here, but if they can continue to build on that, then I have a feeling that some of the heat that's under Jason Garrett's seat might start to subside a little bit. We'll see. We'll definitely see. And the final surprise, where is the pass rush? All right. Now, if I had told you that this year a pass rushing arsenal of Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence up front, Azeez Ojulari, Lorenzo Carter, and O'Shane Ximenez on the edges, and cornerbacks James Bradbury and Adoree Jackson would only have 6 sacks in 4 games, would you believe me? I know I wouldn't. And by the way, I mentioned the cornerbacks because the coverage is just as much as responsible for the guys' plays up front. Because if they're not holding their coverage, then the guys up front are probably going to have no chance of getting to the quarterback. So anyway, the Giants have a 4.0 sack percentage rate, which is 29th in the league. They've had trouble getting home with the pass rush. Now, we talk about sacks. That's the ultimate goal. It is not the be-all, end-all goal. You want to get hits. You want to get hurries. You want to move the quarterback off his spot. The Giants haven't even been doing that with the pass rush. And for proof of that, I went and I looked up the average time to throw by the quarterbacks they have faced. And with one exception, Washington quarterback Taylor Heineke, who had less than 2.5 seconds to throw the ball. Every quarterback the Giants have faced so far in the first 4 games had at least 2.63 seconds to throw to as much as 3.05 seconds, that being Teddy Bridgewater in week 1 of the Denver Broncos. Think about it, 3 seconds to throw, that's an eternity for a quarterback. That means the pass rush isn't even getting close to the quarterback to get a sniff of the guy. So that to me has been a surprise because I really thought that pass rush, I'm not saying it would, the sacks would have come in droves, but at least get some pressure, at least, get the quarterbacks that you're facing to throw the ball in, less than 2.5 seconds. That means you're getting home, that you're moving them off his spot. And that just hasn't happened. And that's surprising. All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's Locked On Giants podcast. But first, let me tell you about Built Bar. Built Bar is a healthy, low carb, low sugar, and high protein treat that will satisfy your sweet tooth. Choose from 9 amazing flavors, all covered in authentic milk chocolate. And they have limited time flavors available as well, available in nut and nut-free varieties. When you visit BuiltBar.com, you can get 15% off your first order with our special promo code LOCKED15. That's LOCKED15 for 15% off your first order from BuiltBar.com. All right, Giant fans, you've got Patricia Traina here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Again, thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day or your first watch if you're on YouTube. And we are talking about storylines, surprises, and what to watch in the weeks ahead. So now let's talk about what to watch. All right. First up, potential trades. Now, I go back to something that John Mara said in the spring about how he, when it came to certain players that walked away in free agency, how there was sort of a regret of sorts, not just because the guys left, but because the Giants didn't get anything really, in return for those guys when they walked out the door. You think back to Landon Collins, for example. When he left via free agency, the Giants had to wait over a year before they were able to cash in with an extra third-round draft pick for having lost him. And if you're trying to rebuild a team, that is not the way to do it. That's just not the way to do it. So let's talk about trade prospects that the Giants might be looking to move. And these are all guys, most of the guys, I should say, who are in the final year of their contract, who I don't see the Giants re-signing, and who I think it makes sense to move. If they can get something decent, a day 3 pick, take what you can get for them. Don't sit there and hold out and expect a first round pick for some of these guys. Those day 3 draft picks are just as valuable because you can package them up if you want to move up or down in the draft. So hopefully the Giants changed their philosophy on that. All right, so let's talk about the prospects. And the first two will help save the Giants a lot of cap money if they are moved by the trade deadline. And of course, I'm talking about safety Jabril Peppers and tight end Evan Ingram. Now, of those two, my guess is Peppers is the more likely to be moved if he is healthy, that is. Peppers right now is dealing with that hamstring strain, and he's got to get healthy before they even think about moving him. The reason why I say Peppers is more likely because more and more of his snaps have been going to Xavier McKinney with some of the leftover going to Julian Love. And if Xavier McKinney is the future at that spot and Julian Love is going to continue to be the Johnny on the spot type of guy who can do all that stuff, what do you really need Peppers for? I mean, I know he's a team captain. I like the guy. Don't get me wrong. He's a punt returner. But that's all. What he does right now, I think, is replaceable. And if the Giants can move him, I think they can maybe get back some of that salary cap. I think he's making close to $7 million this year. So, hey, the Giants are squeezed against the salary cap. See if you can get some of that money back so that you can get through the rest of the year. Because, heck, you don't want to keep restructuring contracts because now you're going to mortgage your future. All right, I mentioned Evan Ingram. And would the Giants move him? I know the Giant fans would love to see Evan Ingram moved. But with Caden Smith being on the injury report, it seems every week with a knee ailment, if I'm the Giants, I might be reluctant to move Evan Ingram. As much as I think they could probably get something for him, and maybe even I don't know if they could get a day 2 pick for him, but certainly I would think at least a high day 3 pick. I'm not so sure they move him for the reason I just mentioned. The guy's still very athletic. I think they still think they can tap into what he brings to the table. But, at this point, I don't see Evan Ingram being back with this team next year, nor should he be, by the way. The other guy I mentioned, and I don't think the Giants are going to move him because he's on his rookie deal. He doesn't cost a whole lot. But I mentioned him, and I'll tell you why, is Darius Slayton. Now, to me, again, Slayton right now is on his rookie deal. He's not a huge cap hit. But with that said, you've got Golladay, you've got Ross, you've got Tony. Those are 3 deep threats, which Slayton is. Do you really need all 4? I mean, you can't get the ball to everybody every game. So you have an excess here. And I know, the second they trade away a receiver, there's going to be injuries. And right now, speaking of injuries, Slayton, of course, is dealing with the hamstring, so nobody's going to touch him. I don't think they move him, but if the Giants were looking to maybe clear out some space and maybe, have the money to, I don't know, extend John Ross, for example, if he continues to play well. That would be an approach I would take. What do you got to lose? All right. Next story that we're keeping an eye on. Will Daniel Jones continue growing? All right. We saw the Daniel Jones against the Saints that the Giants believed they were getting when they drafted him 6th overall in 2019. I mean, that was as gutsy of a performance as I have ever seen from Daniel Jones. And you would have to go back to his first start against Tampa Bay in 2019 to find a performance like that. All right. So that said, was that performance against the Saints an outlier, or is that what we're going to see moving forward? I'd like to think it's what we're going to see moving forward. Unlike the first one against Tampa Bay, where in retrospect, the signs were there that it was an outlier. Again, the inconsistent offensive line, not really having, a good supporting cast around him, the fact that he was in his first year in the system. So I think this time around, Daniel Jones is going to be in a better position to start stacking those types of performances moving forward. Now, once in a while, will he have a clunker? Probably. I mean, all quarterbacks have clunkers once in a while, but the trick is to have more good performances than clunkers. So that's something to keep an eye on. And then the final thing to keep an eye on, speaking of stories, has this Giants team finally turned the corner? Now, here's I guess a scary thought if you think about it. The Giants, as we know, are 1-3 as of this recording. But if Adoree Jackson makes that interception and Darius Slayton doesn't drop that ball, guess what? The Giants could be 3-1 right now. Seriously. And we're not talking about, have they turned the corner? Or, the Giants are in third place, or, they're not in the Cowboys class, whatever, all that negative stuff. The good thing about the mistakes the Giants have made that have cost them games is that they're all correctable. And I know coaches say that all the time. And we as media and as fans, we sit there and we say, la-di-da, you correct one mistake and then another pops up. I don't want to hear it, just get it fixed. But overall, I would say that the mistakes aren't as glaring as they were last year in terms of, guys being out of place or things like that. I think it does boil down to the execution. And sometimes, yes, you have a screw up where, an offensive lineman, for example, jumps early, or a receiver or tight end drops the ball, basic stuff that they should be able to do at this point. But overall, I don't think the Giants had played really horrible football the first 3 weeks. I mean, you can make the argument that they did against the Falcons, maybe against the Broncos here and there, but you saw a lot of good though in those games. You saw the potential that that left you just thinking, gee, if they just put this together and clean up some of this sloppiness, they might actually be good. Now, again, this is all coming off of an encouraging win against the New Orleans Saints. The Giants have a tough schedule that lies ahead of them. Can they stand toe-to-toe with this group that they are going to face? That's going to be the question. Now, I don't think the Giants are going to go on a run where they win all their remaining games. I don't see that happening. But what I want to see over these next few games that's going to tell me that they've turned the corner, can the Giants stand toe-to-toe with their competition? If they're getting blown out, then we know that the Saints game was a fluke. If they're staying competitive and losing by, like a touchdown or less, then we can say that they're turning the corner and they're cleaning up some of these mistakes, and that brighter days are hopefully ahead. All right, Giant fans, that is going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. I want to thank you again for tuning in, checking us out on YouTube if you are watching this show, or if you're listening to us wherever you get your podcasts. We do appreciate you making us your first listen of the day. And make sure you check out some of our other great podcasts, Locked On NFL, Locked On Today, Locked On Bets. We've got so many, can't go wrong. So check those out. And if you are watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and like the channel. We're getting close to that lollipop mark. So when I get it, trust me, I'll let you guys know. All right, Giant fans, that'll do it for me. Thank you again for tuning in. Have a great weekend. David Turner joins me on Monday to break down the Giants at Dallas. We'll see you then.